Alright guys, welcome back to the garage. So the last episode at the track was pretty eventful. It worked out really good. You saw the videos, the in-car, the out-car, the Brian cam and all that stuff. The car ran great and I'm not even mad, but it's got a hurt piston. I think in that video I mentioned it had a bad head gasket. So Brian and I pulled the engine out of the car, and the number 4 cylinder has a crack across the top of the piston, and I'll bring the camera over so you can get a look at it. I don't think you'll be able to see it, but maybe, I don't know. Anyways, not quite sure exactly what happened to it, but it appears to be that the whole passenger side of the engine is having some sort of problems getting fuel, like as in the injectors are dirty or something along those lines. Loud truck alert. Okay, and so we're going to tear into the short block to see what happened, and Brian is going to Snapchat away whilst we do that. Okay, so this is what I was talking about earlier. That looks like it's just a scratch, but when you zoom in on it, there's actually 3 cracks there. There's one right there, which is probably not visible in the camera, and there's another one right around here. And you can only see it when it's zoomed in, but this crack right here goes all the way down into the valve relief, and it's kind of hard to tell from the perspective of the camera, but there's a little bit of a flat spot right here. And ultimately what I think has happened is this ringland is pinched and these rings are not floating anymore, and it has 0 compression in this cylinder, and as you can see the piston rocks quite a bit, which is normal. The pistons are going to rock, but the rings are going to help that some. So that cylinder is damaged, and we're going to get it apart and see exactly what's wrong with it. Okay, Brian walking in, and he's singing in the background there, but if you guys think back a couple of videos ago where the car did the wheelie in the left lane and it came down real hard and sparks and stuff come out of it, if you look right here, the oil pan's actually got an accordion look to it where it got squished down, and there's rubber stains on the corners of the pans, and the drain plug thing is half ground off and all that good stuff. So we got all the fasteners off the oil pan. We're ready to take it off and check it out. Cross your fingers, hope it's not too bad. Get this last rod out. This is the one with the problem, so we're going to check it out. One other thing that we found wrong with it, and I saw it on the oil change, wasn't really all that concerned about it. But this is not good. See if you can see that in the camera there. Those pieces that you're looking at are metal, and those are actually the springs off of the valve stem seals. For those of you who really watch close, you would have noticed that the motor, the car smokes a lot, and for the longest time I thought it was the oil, the drain out of the turbo, and we had changed that when this motor went in the car. Or when this freshen up went in the car, and that didn't do anything for it. It still smoked, blah blah blah. Well, now that we got the heads off of it, got to look at it again, the all of the valve seals are up off of the valve guides, and presumably getting bounced around, and it's knocking the springs off of them, and all those springs end up in the oil pan. No, it's not a good idea to run the motor with little metal springs floating around in the pan, but I wasn't really all that concerned about it. It could have been really expensive and probably not a good thing to do, but we did it. It's over, and now we're time to see what's wrong with this piston. So I got the bolts broke loose. We're gonna knock that thing out real quick and see what it looks like. And there's a bolt laying down in there somewhere. It's on top of that piston.
Just need a magnet in it.
Or stainless steel.
Oh, the ARPs are?
Yep. All right. So let's knock this thing out real quick. I pulled the wrong piston out, so this one's going to be fine.
Oh God. All right. We're taking them all out anyway, right?
Yeah. All right, as I expected, this one looks fine. Valve relief, no cracks in it or anything right there, which is where it most likely happened at. And the rings look like rings. I'll have to check them a little closer, but it looks like the coating might be a little beat up on them. I guess we'll find out here in a minute. Oh, and the bearings look spotless in it, which is good. At least on this side of the motor, they were fine. The cylinders look fine, the head gasket looks fine, so that's a good thing.
Can you turn the motor over for you?
Not yet. So the good thing is that particular rod is very free floating, so the bearing is probably not tore up. The rod's not discolored or anything like that. Lower bearing looks good, but it's not the one that gets tore up, it's the top bearing that gets tore up. So this piston comes out really easy and it's full of oil, so okay, so for sure the top ring is seized up. The skirts are scored. Yeah, and the ring land is definitely lifted.
Ooh. Cut yourself? Yeah, I see that. Is that your retaining clip?
Yeah.
Road Roach.
That could have been bad.
Holy crap.
Pins are floating freely good too. Okay, so this piston is 100% trash. Right here, I don't know if I'm gonna see this up close or not. Right here, let's see, get the light on it just right. Right there, you can pretty plainly see it's a crack, and it goes down into that valve relief pretty good, and I think you can see that in the camera. And if I turn it around, above the ringland is scored really bad, and right here you can see it's also scoring a little bit, and then there's a weird pinch for no reason right there. And on the top of the piston, it's got some corresponding heat in it right there. You can see that shadow on there is a little bit different looking. So that's good. That's all I expect to see wrong with this thing, is that one particular piston. Oh, and there's where the crack is right there. If you look close, you can see the gap above the ring right there where it started to take that ringland and pick it straight up. The next step would have been the ringland being gone and that piece getting bounced around in the cylinder and probably going through the turbo. So at this point, that's all I expect to find wrong with the short block. Oh, and look at this little jewel. That is a spiral lock sticking up right there. That could have been really bad news. So I think that was probably a good time that we tore into this thing and checked it out. Okay, so I want to show you guys the last couple of things that were wrong with the motor. The bearings were fine, both rods and mains. The mains had a small amount of extra thrust clearance that I really, it wasn't bad. It was 7.5 thousandths, and I think the max is 5 or 6. So it's a tiny, tiny bit loose, not bad at all. I'm just gonna go ahead and put new bearings in it. But the initial cause of all the problems was the number 4 piston seizing the rings. Obviously leaned out, maybe even had a tad bit too much timing in it. But the damage is, and I think you might be able to see it in the camera, I'll zoom in for you, but if you look right here, it even started to melt the thin part of the chamber between the valve seats, and I'm pretty sure you can see that color in the camera. The other thing was the head gasket on that cylinder started going away, and I'm going to show you what a copper gasket does just before it turns completely loose and really makes a mess out of things. But if you'll look, I think you can probably see it there. Yeah. So that ring right there is about twice as wide as it should be. And if you look down the gasket, it's probably going to be really hard to see in camera. Yeah, you can see it right there. Let me see. Right in here, you see that hump? So what it was trying to do, it was trying to push that gasket out. And it even stretched the gasket to the point where, if you look, the gasket is bent over this way where it was trying to squeeze out from under the cylinder head. And then last but not least, and I'm sure it's going to be hard to see, but there's some marking on the surface of the gasket right here where the gasket was actually moving like this in the cylinder head, between the cylinder head and the block, and it was trying everything it could do to get loose. And that wire lock, the stainless steel wiring and the receiver groove just wasn't going to turn loose of it. Sometimes they do, and when they do, they melt the cylinder head and cause all kinds of other problems. But what it did do was this, and again, you probably can't see that in the camera, but that groove should be good and square, and you should hear your fingernails, clicking on it. And right here, it's almost non-existent. So that gasket was rounding that groove away as it moved back and forth. So it looks like the damage report is going to be at least a couple of wrist pins again, maybe 3, 1 piston, both head gaskets, a valve job, deck the heads, recut the wiring grooves, and I finally found out what all the smoking was, why it always smoked, and I just never could figure it out. I always went to the turbo drain because I thought the turbo wasn't draining correctly. But come to find out, and I showed you some in the video earlier, but all of the valve seals are moved up off of the valve guides, and it's probably consuming oil that way. So, not the end of the world. That's racing. That's what happens, when you push your luck, and you probably either A, don't refine the tune-up, or B, I have a sneaking suspicion that while the car sat in Corona timeout, that the injectors, specifically the methanol injectors, probably got clogged up with some kind of particulate. So when I put the motor back together, I'm going to flush all the injectors again and overall check it out. One thing to note is that before we started racing on May 1st, when we came back to the track after Corona timeout, I noticed that the IATs, the air charge temperatures, were in the 160 range. Prior to us going in Corona timeout, the IATs were in the 105 degree range. Now we did get a little bit of an increase in ambient temperature, but not 60 some degrees difference. So that is why I think that the methanol injectors are possibly to blame here. So lesson learned. Again, that's racing. That's how things work. So we get to completely freshen the motor again. Not the end of the world. Not like I haven't done it before. Okay, guys, so that's the end of the video. A lot of blabbering, the analysis of the failure of the engine. And it could have got ugly. It was on its way to getting ugly. The head gasket could have gone completely out. Could have burned the head. Could have turned that wrist pin loose. Could have went from a $1,500 fix right now to a $10,000 fix, because that's a really nice set of billet rods, a really nice set of custom pistons, a Dart Iron Eagle block that would have probably had more than one hole in it. So I got lucky. My fingers were crossed when I was going through the lights at about 180. So, did I say that out loud? Anyways, so yeah, that's the end of the video, guys. If you made it this far, congratulations. You are still in quarantine, or you're really bored, one or the other. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Be sure to subscribe, hit the thumbs up, and hit the notification icon. We will see you in the next video.